All right, accursed. This is it. The show of shows. The night of nights. No more rehearsing. It's the longest day of the year for anybody working in a campaign anywhere. E-Day. It's not just physically long and tiring, but the wait is excruciating. Whether you're full of hope or dread or both. We're going to talk about what we're looking at today, what ridings we're looking at, what we think about turnout, what we think about the leaders. We're going to look back at moments and decisions that were key to the outcome, and we'll make predictions. So, but you know what? Before we start, Scott, it is a slow news day, obviously. Do you have, by any chance, a very long and intermittently amusing anecdote that you could tell at some point in this show?
I will return to that subject a little later. I'll compose one in my brain. I had no forewarning. But long and tedious anecdotes are never far from my fingertips.
All right. So let's start with what ridings we're paying attention to today. Deb, you probably have a long history of looking at, you've won some big elections in Ontario. You know what kind of ridings are at stake when the PCs are winning big. What are you looking at today?
Well, there's a few that I find interesting and a few that actually will matter. The one that I find interesting is Haldimand Norfolk. So you may recall in the last election, Toby Barrett didn't run again. Long-time MPP, not a name that was well known, but a good old constituency guy in mostly rural Ontario down in Haldimand County. And his assistant wanted to run, his constituency assistant, and the party chose a mayor of Haldimand instead. So Bobby Ann Brady is her name. She ran and she defeated the official PC candidate and mayor of Haldimand. So she's running again. She could be the first incumbent who's been elected, not because they, like Sarah Jama, got elected as one party member and then ran as an independent. She actually ran and won as an independent and is now running against the mayor of Norfolk. So that's an interesting one for me. It's not particularly consequential, but I do think from a political perspective, it's just a good one to watch. In terms of the pickups, Niagara Centre, next door to that riding, I think could well go blue. It's currently NDP. For people who are as old as most of us on this podcast, that's the riding of Mel Schwartz. It's the riding of Peter Kormos. It is currently held by a guy who you probably haven't heard of either. I think his name is Jeff Birch, but that could go conservative. And they are watching Niagara Falls. I think we talked about it. Wayne Gates is potentially unbeatable, but they're looking at it and they've put some money, resources, and time into it, along with St. Catharines. Toronto, obviously.
What's changed in that area?
I'm sorry?
What's changed in that area that would make it go blue?
Well, keep in mind, a lot of it is a border town. So I think Doug's message around fighting Trump tariffs is huge down there. They've had some tough times, too. And sometimes that goes NDP, protection for the workers, and other times it goes conservative. I think at this stage, it used to be quite liberal. I think when Tim won his riding, my husband won his riding down there, it hadn't been liberal since before he had been born. So I think it's just a general shift, and it is much more a blue-orange shift. Jim Bradley had a lock on St. Catharines for a long time. He's now the regional chair. So I don't know if it's a shift in demographics or anything like that. I think it's much more state of the economy there.
Right. Jordan, if the NDP are going to surprise us tonight, it's because their GOTV pulled out vote in key ridings. Which ones are you looking at?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm looking, they've got a number of seats that they're looking to pick up. I think the one that's really interesting that I've been watching is Sault Ste. Marie. So this is an open PC seat at the moment. So that was Ross Romano, who was a cabinet minister. He's not running again. The NDP candidate is a city councillor there, Lisa Vizot Allen. So she's pretty prominent. She's been out for a number of years there. The PC candidate is like sort of a very typical story. It was like a hand-picked Doug Ford staffer who appears to be running a campaign against local debate organizers more than anything else. When he does bother to turn up in the media, it's sort of a parody. If anyone loves that stuff, I would really encourage you to Google some of his interactions around that. But healthcare is a huge, huge issue in this riding. So a couple of years ago, about 10,000 people in the riding were derostered from a local health center. So it's a place where the issues around healthcare are being felt like really, really acutely. It's also steel town. So Algoma Steel is the biggest employer there. So this is going to be kind of an interesting space, I think, an interesting fight. I also really like the local campaign. They did some cool stuff. Like they bought out all the advertising at the OHL game. They were at the Scotties and the curling. Like they were on the the Jumbotron. Like so, they really have done some neat stuff to connect with people in the north in a particular way, and they're feeling a lot of momentum on the ground for that as a pickup. So that's one that I'm going to be looking for. I think that's a pretty interesting race there.
Interesting. I'll keep my eye on that one now too. Scott, what do you think?
I'll be watching St. Paul's in particular, Jill Andrews' seat. And the reason I say that is that if St. Paul's goes Liberal, if Stephanie Smythe steals it, the former broadcaster, it doesn't tell you that the Liberals are necessarily going to be official opposition. Doesn't even mean they actually 100% get official party status, but it means that the NDP are in real trouble. So if they lose that riding, then that tells you that they're for sure not going to be winning the Sioux, and it means that they're in for a real troublesome night. In terms of pickups and stuff, obviously we got to watch Bonnie's riding if you're a Liberal. Can she defy? If they're at 54% or whatever the Christ it is, the PCs and in the 905, then Bonnie has to literally defy gravity through the power of her name and personality. And I don't think that that's impossible. And I think the campaign is sincerely confident about her riding. Like I met with a couple folks last night and had a beer, and they are not putting up a brave face. They genuinely, so they'll be shocked if she loses the riding because they are actually they're counting on it. I'd also watch Scarborough Centre. It's a PC riding. To me, the demographics of that riding don't make a lot of sense for the PCs to hang on to it unless it's pure sweep territory, and we are in pure sweep territory. But I still think the Liberals could steal that in what will be an almost three-way race. At least the NDP won't be a complete ghost there, I don't think. So, those are.
Ford has a real following in Scarborough. Personal.
He does.
Yeah.
It's kind of it's the bookend of a Etobicoke, right? He's got the kind of the outside of the core city. And it's not quite like pure 905-ish kind of vibe. Like it's because it's more urban, it's more city, but it's, like the kind of the corners of the city, Etobicoke, Scarborough, he's got a personal appeal and pull. But I think if the Liberals take Scarborough Centre, then they're looking at 18, 19 seats probably.
What about Eglinton Lawrence, Scott?
Yeah, I'm curious about Eglinton Lawrence also, and also
Liberals,
905 in general. Like
Liberals tell me they're going to win it. It's my home riding. The NDP pulls out, so that's a factor. I still worry about two things in that riding.
The
I think the Liberals
poll does show them winning that, right?
I think so. So they seem like they think that they've got that by 4 or 5 points, and that they're pretty confident about it. And I guess that's probably right. Two things concern me in that riding. It's my home riding. One, there's a lot of upper income, and two, it's still very Jewish. Like there's and
that concerns you.
Well, I'm always worried when they gather in numbers. My Jewish neighbors are never going to vote anything but conservative now. October 7th has been a radicalizing event, not surprisingly. It's been a traumatic event. It lingers. My neighborhood, you walk the dog. There are plenty bring our hostages home signs still. And those people will not vote Liberal in any way, shape, or form. And so I don't. Now there's also a large Orthodox community in the riding, and they may not vote. Like it's kind of culturally, some do, some don't. So, we'll have to see how that plans out. But those things just give me a little hesitation because they're harder to detect in a main street poll. But those are the kinds of things that will affect the outcome. I think it'll be close, but they think they're going to win.
Let me throw a log on the fire. I think Etobicoke Lakeshore is interesting.
Mm.
And not just because, Scott, we have two friends, Joanna Leffler and Jim Pimblett, working in that riding, which means they're going to have a good organization and a good E-Day operation. But Lee Fairclough there is a very, very good candidate. She came within 800 votes of winning last time, and has been working at it ever since. And that to me is a riding that if the Liberals win it, they've got party status for sure. That means they're going to win. If they win that riding, they're going to win 12 ridings. But it isn't that much of an uphill climb. Peter Milchin won it handily for us in 2014, and as I said, we're quite competitive last time. So if that one flips, then I think a good night for the Liberals. If that's
I'll throw out another long shot, and Deb will shake her head, probably rightly. And this is a confessingly sentimental choice, but I'm also going to watch Quinny, which is my home riding where my folks still live. And I say that because Hugh O'Neill, who represented, I think I mentioned him once before on this pod, Hugh O'Neill represented the area for years and years and years when you couldn't get a Liberal elected dog catcher in that area. His son is running, and the demographics of that riding have changed. It's not a natural conservative riding now. It's much more urbanized in the city of Belleville, much more professionalized in terms of the demographics in the city. And they are in the midst of that opioid crisis. You'll remember last summer with 50, like dozen people drop on the streets downtown, obviously a bad batch of fentanyl. And that's where my mom lives. That's where my mom does not have a fucking doctor. Right. So and it's an older population too. So when people talk about not being able to get a family doctor, when you talk about the memory in an older riding of the name O'Neill, when you look at the concerns around healthcare, I just think it's a possibility. But look, if the Liberals win Quinte, which they came close in that by-election. David O'Neill wasn't running, but they came close in the last by-election. If they win Quinte, then they are rolling. They are probably over 20 seats, and they are clearly in official opposition territory.
I think any riding that doesn't have an incumbent, I mean, Jordan mentioned Sault Ste. Marie. There's also Michael Ford's old riding.
York Southwestern.
Yeah, that's his old riding. Marit spent some time there. I think she ended her day yesterday there.
That's right, yeah. No, they're feeling good about their chances there. Repeat candidate for the NDP with strong community ties. I think they're hoping to take it.
Those people used to vote for John Nunziata, so you never know what they'll do.
That's right.
Keeping the element of surprise.
I drive my kid at hockey practice and out riding. I don't know. I know that lawn signs mean sweet fuck all. It's the most anecdotal of evidence, but boy, oh boy, there's a lot of PC lawn signs.
A lot of this hinges on turnout.
That's what they say about elections.
I've heard that
hinges on turnout
before.
And the last election had a precipitously low one. 44%, I think, dropped 12 points from the previous election campaign. This has been a very quiet campaign. This has been competing with it for attention with a lot of other things in politics and developments. And there's not a lot of public evidence that Ontarians have been tremendously engaged in this campaign. Jordan, what do you think? What are you expecting today in terms of turnout?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's no question that turnout is going to be low. I think probably lower than last election, although hopefully not dramatically so. I think that generally speaking, a low turnout is probably going to hurt the Liberals the most because they have probably the lightest infrastructure on the ground in terms of pulling the vote. Like that, of course, like the McGuinty machine is no more, right? So in terms of the labor that they have available to get out, especially when they've done really big ad spends, it's always that balance at the end. And I think that they are going to have a bit of a tougher time covering off the entire province that way. I think it's interesting, and maybe I'd be interested in your takes on this too. The idea that the election is a foregone conclusion, is that motivating, or is that just in general suppressive? Like, is that something that even for PC voters, they might decide to stay home because he clearly doesn't need their support in any way? And I think that could also advantage the NDP in some of those blue-orange races where they maybe have that infrastructure on the ground and they're a little bit hungrier for those votes.
Normally you would say that low turnouts benefit the incumbent because, as the fact that there was 56% in 2018 means that there was some determination on the part of people to get out and make a change. And if that doesn't happen, it's because there's no real desire to make a change. And there was some evidence in Kyla's numbers, sponsored, of course, by Enbridge Gas, reliable, affordable natural gas to heat your homes and power our economy. The more engaged people were, the less likely they were to be voting conservative, which is kind of interesting. So the relatively disengaged people are defaulting to the PCs and Ford, whereas the most engaged people were more conflicted. Scott, what are you expecting to see today?
I expect low voter turnout, and I went out to put out the garbage and grab a cup of coffee, and there's wet flurries. And you look on the forecast, at least for the city of Toronto, that's what we're going to get. We're going to get a centimeter of wet, crummy, slow snow, which means that your drive to drop your kids or get to work is going to be slow and frustrating. And your calculation in your brain about, all right, so maybe I get the kids to music first and then I'm going to go vote. It's just, I think
this is why everybody in the country hates Toronto. They're going to get a little bit of wet snow. So democracy is out the window.
Couldn't
possibly. Honest to God, right? No one's paying attention. Donald Trump holds a press conference or says something new about tariffs every other day. It snows on election day. Doug Ford was born with a horseshoe jammed up his ass. It's unbelievable how fortunate this guy is. So I think we're going to get very low voter turnout.
Greetings, Canadian Political Pod listener. I'm your narrator, Gary, an artificial intelligence-generated voice. Exciting and serious sounding is what we typed in the AI voiceover input field. And boom, Gary exists. Hey, do you know what's not artificial? Not even one bit? The highly influential audiences air quotes media podcasts offer to its advertisers. And I say that with all the sincerity a machine learning, data-optimized, predictive network of interconnected neural nodes can muster. Whether your ad message is on Curse of Politics, the Hurly-Burly, Hotel Pacifico, or the brand new Race to Replace, you will be reaching cabinet ministers, members of parliament, the political class, the C-suite, and corporate Canada, leading journalists, and tens of thousands of engaged Canadians. People saying this is a unique political moment is underselling it. Policy is under scrutiny. A party leader is being voted on. The Ontario election is underway. There will be a new prime minister. And then there's the guy living in the White House who calls us the 51st state. Does anyone remember another time like this? I'm instantly scouring millions of data points to answer my own rhetorical question. No, you do not. This is when you need to get your message to the decision makers. Email us at contact@airquotesmedia.com. You'll be dealing with Jill and Todd, who are real, not artificial at all people, and generally very friendly. Well, Jill is anyway. We're still deciding about Todd.
All right, let's move ahead to what we consider to be the decisive or determinative moments or developments in the campaign. Normally, I might use the term turning points, but there don't appear to have been any turning points. So what were the decisive moments, decisions, actions? Scott, you want to start us off?
Well, I think three things come to mind. I'll have one for each party, and these aren't too terribly scientific. But first, for the PCs, I think you have to look at this. Let's say that tonight Doug Ford gets 90-ish seats. That means that in 3 consecutive elections, he has increased his majority every time that he's in. So he wins a majority, then increases it in his second kick, then increases it his third kick. He has managed to buck any kind of anti-incumbent pressures. He's gone through COVID. He's gone through post-COVID inflation. He's gone through the beginnings of Trump and only fortified his position and cemented his political status. It's a heck of an achievement. And I think when you ask why, you have to look at the way that they use not just party advertising since they got into government, but the way in which they harnessed government advertising, the amount that they spend, the way in which it's focused on their core themes, more or less legitimately, people will quibble over that, but it's highlighting critical initiatives, but they're all economic initiatives. They're all well produced and they'll reinforce. And I think that it gets mentioned when people bitch on the sidelines, But the power of that advertising in a world where earned media, as we've talked about incessantly, is decreasing in influence. I just think that when you go, well, how can that be? That guy has fortified his position. I think one factor that might get slightly overlooked by some is the way in which they've used paid media in government and how it's helped to build and fortify and maintain his brand. I think for the NDP, the firing of Sarah Jama, which I think was entirely justified, and I think that Marit Stiles showed courage. But I'll be wondering tonight if the NDP do not have the usual turnout machine, if among the factors that we're going to see is internal divisions that haven't been maybe as widely prosecuted in public, but I think those tensions exist. I wonder if some of the more like the sort of squad type activists are just not there for the NDP tonight. Also with the diminution in terms of at least private sector involvement in organization, I worry that Marit's going to get punished for, in my view, trying to exert her rightful position as leader, impose some discipline, and maintain some centrist impulse. And then I think finally for the Liberals, it turns out that picking Bonnie Crombie was for sure the right choice. I mean, they went out, they got a mayor, they got somebody with name recognition. She's not going to win this election, but it looks like she's resuscitated the beating heart. So I think the turning point for the Liberals actually was not like all due respect, if Nate Eskin-Smith had won this election, I think it could have been a slide right into the into Lake Ontario. So I think those are my 3 points.
Right. Deb, what do you think was the decisive point in the campaign?
Well, I think I'm close to where Scott is in that I think the decisive moments actually happened before the campaign started.
For sure.
So we actually haven't talked about this, but I've been keen to ask Jordan a little bit about how little Marit was able to do before she had Bonnie side by side with her. In other words, she spent a long time while she had that lead as the only opposition leader, technically, and she squandered it. She did not put the New Democrats on the map as the official opposition. And the reason I think for that is that she spent most of her time talking about the crap and corruption stuff. You know, I mean, how many times can you talk about Ontario Place? How many times can you talk about the Greenbelt and not recognize it's not moving public opinion? And so she didn't, I think it's a little bit of Scott's point, she didn't sort of eke out what do the Marit Stiles New Democrats look like? How have I put together that coalition? She didn't do it. She simply did old school opposition that didn't give her the kind of boost over Bonnie in that time when she could have had her own run. She just didn't use it well. So I think New Democrats made some mistakes thinking that they could do old school opposition and then not have any sort of coalescing around Marit's leadership. And the Sarah Jama factor is part of that. Secondly, I think the timing, the message, yes, there's some luck involved in the campaign for the Conservatives, but their strategy to go early, whether we like it or not from a high level perspective, was brilliant. Their commitment to message, all you hear is protect Ontario, and at a time when people want to feel that. The discipline of the campaign, again, I've been critical of some of the things that led them to have that discipline, like not doing as much media, not doing as many debates, et cetera. But all of that all happened in terms of what their plan was, what their strategy was, how they executed that. Most of that comes pre-campaign. And when you look at the numbers, again, I'm not suggesting campaigns don't matter, because for Bonnie Crombie, they do, this particular one. But Doug Ford had this wrapped up. We just didn't know it before the writ dropped.
Jordan?
Yeah, I mean, I'll be a third to say I think all of the decisive moments happened before the campaign, and in fact, in some cases, well before the campaign. And you know, I think to the questions about the NDP, I would agree. I think that one of the challenges that the NDP had is that official opposition makes Queen's Park the focus of a lot of the work, and that is a bit of a black hole, frankly, in terms of the coverage that actually reaches voters. And I think I would maybe disagree a little bit with Deb, because I think the crap and corruption stuff is important and necessary. It's a big part of wedging out some of those negatives for Ford that we know actually have traction with voters, that people actually are more inclined to believe about what motivates him and why he makes some of the decisions that he makes in order to reward people who are close to him and things like that. That's a message that we know is resonant. But I think the challenge for Marit is that it's not just about visibility for Marit. It also had to be about differentiation. It had to be about what makes her stand out as a leader. And I think that she has a ton of really amazing qualities. And this campaign has shown her to be quite a capable and talented campaigner that can connect with people. But she needed more runway. She needs more time in order to get that message about what animates her specifically and what her particular offer is in front of voters. And I think that, as we've talked about on previous podcasts, that unlike maybe normal elections where the writ period was a time where you could lift off on that. You could do that because you're getting those, that equalized attention. This was more like a brick wall because of just the media environment and the issue set around the Trump and tariffs. So I think that the challenge for Marit is that, with that hindsight, I think that, the introduction of Marit was important, but also really showing how she is different from the Liberals and eventually from Crombie and how her offering is unique and compelling to voters. So I think that, the good news for Marit is I'm bullish on that. I think that they are going to absolutely retain official opposition status. And I think that she is going to take a lot from this campaign and come back very strong, and she is facing an opponent in Crombie who we still don't know is going to win her seat or not. So I think it'll be interesting to see the leadership after this. And I would rate Crombie as being a little bit more in danger internally. And for the Liberals, I think it's hard because they were in such a depleted position, without the infrastructure of official party status, that really, all of the issues, so like the poor candidate vetting, the lack of infrastructure on the ground, all of those things, how do you fix that? I guess Bonnie, maybe if she'd been able to revitalize fundraising, that might have been the key, but all of that just didn't come together for them in the early period. And they really weren't able to separate in a dramatic way during the campaign.
Yeah, no, that party is a jalopy with a paint job right now and needs a lot of internal work. Nobody talked about how lucky Ford got because the insight they've had for a long time is that they were going to hold their election before Pierre Poilievre became prime minister. That was the core thing. They were going to get out ahead of the federal election. They didn't have a reason. They didn't have a hook. They're wandering around looking for a fig leaf, and Trump arrives with the tariff threat. It's manna from heaven. And so it was a tremendous fig leaf, and we've seen as recently as 2021 federally what happens if you don't have a decent justification for am I frozen or is Reid dead?
I'm dead. I'm dead. No, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. But Car Wheels on a Gravel Road is such a great album. I'm just thinking about all the tracks there.
Yeah. So anyway, they knew what they needed to do, and Trump gave them exactly the means to do it. The perfect issue, the perfect frame, and a solid enough justification. All right.
David, can I just push back on that a little bit? Because I really believe, as much as Kory's brilliance was go before Poilievre, I agree with that. But the premier had to pull the trigger ultimately. And I think if he hadn't been given the fig leaf, they may not have gone. So yes, they were given that, but they wouldn't have pulled the trigger if they didn't think they could do it. So it's not like they were going regardless. I do not believe the premier actually was ready to go unless he had something to sink his teeth into. So
that's probably true.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
Yeah, it makes sense. Okay, so let's get right to our predictions. What do you expect tonight in terms of a result? When Deb Hutton talks, people listen. So let's hear it.
The premier will get more seats than he has today. Not sure he'll hit that 104 prediction from yesterday, David Herle, but
no, 124.
Oh, was it 124?
No, 104.
Oh, was it 104?
one-
Oh, okay.
104.
124 is the entire assembly.
Yeah, that's like, I thought I heard about their
Which is
saying
the
he was
upside of
gonna
the
see.
range. Not inconceivable, but not like
Yeah.
So he'll get more seats. I don't know that he'll break 100, but fingers crossed in some ways. I do believe, Jordan, here's my love for you. I do think the New Democrats will pull out a bare official opposition. And actually, I don't think Bonnie is in good shape, quite frankly. I will say if she gets official party status, it is by the skin of her teeth.
All right. Scott Reid.
I think I have very specific predictions. I think it's going to be 93 seats for Ford, 18 for the Liberals, who will form official opposition and return to party status. I think the NDP will narrowly miss official party status and end up with 11 seats, and the Greens get 2. We'll have to see. It could be 94 and the Greens only get 1. I'm not as convinced as all these models that the Greens get 2, so we'll see. But I think that Ford's going to have more than 90 seats, and I think Crombie's going to she's going to regain official party status, and that's going to be a huge win. And then I think there's going to be a season of terror within the Ontario NDP that will preview a season of terror within the federal NDP. I think there's tough times ahead for that party. Lots of tough times for the Liberal Party. I'm not gleeful about this, but I think some of those subterranean fissures are going to be blown into the open. I think Jill Andrews is going to lose her riding and try to run for leader, and I think you're going to have a real battle for the soul of the New Democratic Party, and it's going to be messy.
Jordan, it doesn't take much, just a couple of decent federal polls for Liberals to become fucking insufferable, doesn't it?
No kidding, eh? My God, whatever.
The waffle movement shall rise with a burning fire.
Give that man a soapbox. Wow, that's a dark fiction you're in, my friend. Yeah, listen, I think maybe not unsurprisingly, I would heartily disagree with Scott. I'm actually a lot closer to Deb in the predictions. I think that we're going to see Ford. I think we'll see him above 90. I think we'll see the NDP with official opposition status with a number of pickups. I think the Liberals will get party status, but I don't know that Crombie's going to win her seat. And I think that her poor performance in the 905 is actually going to turn the knives against her within the Liberal Party pretty quickly. I don't think that her performance is going to offer her any protection.
You think Jill Andrews is going to come after Bonnie Crombie?
What's this obsession with Jill Andrews?
I don't know. Yeah, I know. It's unhealthy. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's just so I think it's interesting to think about, what was Crombie's job here, and the job was for her to compete for government with Ford, and she's not been able to do that in any credible way. So I think actually she's probably in the most danger out of any of the leaders by actually quite a long shot after this campaign. So, and we'll see. And I think turnout is going to be, I'm going to peg it at 43.
Grim. Okay, Scott and I didn't coordinate, but I'm roughly where he is. My precise prediction is 94, 16, 12. 2. And we'll see. We'll know very very soon. So let's end with a blessing and a curse. Who's got a blessing or a curse?
Well, I'm going to give my blessing to Elections Ontario. And tomorrow, I just hope it doesn't turn into a curse, because I'm not convinced they're ready to roll. And I'm not convinced that the polls will all close at 9:00 and everything will be neat and tidy and that we'll have an early evening, because they've been making noises about a lot of excuses. And so I do wish them well. I hope it's a simple polls open, polls close. We count the votes and we're all in bed at a good time. But I don't know.
Oh, God. Don't let it be a long night. I got to do TV from Ford's headquarters, and I don't want to be there after midnight with Kory, dumping beer on my head live on television, going, kiss my biceps, motherfucker, I rule. So I want this evening to be over early and quick.
Blessing, curse.
Was that a blessing or a curse?
I don't even know. I think a lot of projection.
I think Scott's done. He's exhausted.
Just
Jordan,
use that
no,
the,
well,
I-
yeah.
actually, I have a blessing, but it's completely different. Because tomorrow I'll do my final blessing on the campaign. I'm just going to do a random blessing. We haven't mentioned Andrew Fury stepped down, Liberal Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador the other day. He's a hell of a guy. He's a great person. It's a shame to see somebody with his talent. He doesn't need politics, and so he's leaving politics. I hope he'll return to politics. But there was a long time there where like there was provincially there's no liberal lamp left in the window, and he kept it burning. So. Best of luck. Understand your reasons for leaving, but wish you were staying.
Scott left just before my blessing yesterday, and apparently doesn't listen to the pod.
That's what I was thinking. He's like, we
Double
didn't talk about it.
blessed.
Did you say that? I had
Double
to leave. I had to.
blessed.
Did you say this yesterday?
Yeah, I did.
Yeah, that's okay. There's
So
a lot of
nice.
Newfoundland-
Two
there's a lot
times
of
in a row,
Newfoundland-
you know what?
You
Premier
guys
Fury
love
deserves all
Newfoundland
the
so
love
much.
that he
I do
can
just
get.
want to
Aw,
point
man,
out that
I'm
Mara
sorry,
is
that's
originally from
embarrassing. I
Newfoundland,
never
so you
listened to
can
the
you
pod.
can extend your Newfoundland love. That is available to you today.
Well, I feel like a tit. I'm sorry, but he deserves it. I don't listen to the pod. I can't stand listening to myself. I'm an obnoxious dink. I can't bear it.
And that's the reason you feel like a tit?
No, that's the reason I am a tit.
Jordan, do you have a blessing or a curse?
I do. So I, like Scott, I'll do my blessing to the campaign teams and the campaigns tomorrow. But holy hell, go giver today on GOTV. I know everybody is out there, but don't relinquish a single minute. My blessing today, I'm reaching over into the prairies into Manitoba, and it's going out to Wob Canoe, and it's a bit of a more serious one. You may have seen the news last night that there's suspected human remains that have been found at the Prairie Green landfill, and I think. I just want to send out a blessing to Wob Canoe because searching that landfill in the wake of such an ugly campaign against that on the part of the Manitoba Conservatives, he didn't need to make that as a political commitment. It was something that he did, I think, because it's the dignified, the responsible, the right thing to do. Because when somebody goes missing, we go looking for them, and I think that the potential for those families to receive some healing and some closure in those awful events is so important. And it's important. This is a great example of it does matter who wins. It does matter who's there making those decisions. And I really wanted to acknowledge what he and his government are doing there, because I think it's consequential, not just in Manitoba, but for our country.
Thanks, everybody, for watching or listening to this pod all through the election. We'll be back tomorrow, obviously, with our takes on what happened tonight, and that'll be our last show. And that'll be your last chance to see Deb Hutton on this show for a while, although I suspect we're going to be seeing Deb again because she's just been such a tremendous, tremendous part of this show over the course of this election. I do want to thank Enbridge for their sponsorship of the polling. We didn't have any today because we stopped polling last night, but they funded the polling throughout the campaign, and that was a big part of this show and a big part of our analysis as well. So thank you to them, and thank the three of you. Bright and early every morning. We're recording this thing at 6:30, so it was great of you to do it, and thanks. I had a lot of fun. We'll see you tomorrow. Take care of yourselves.